Hello, I'm your host, Nicola Kane, CEO and Principal Consultant at Handley Gill Limited. We're an award-winning legal and regulatory compliance consultancy with specialisms in data protection, responsible AI governance, online safety, human rights, and responsible business. I'm taking over from Alistair this afternoon, at least this afternoon here in London, and I'll be guiding you through the next few sessions. Thank you very much for staying with us. Don't forget to check out the left-hand menu where you'll find an upcoming events tab. Make sure you head over there to learn more and to register for all things risk. You can also check out the upcoming events on the website grcworldforums.com. Our next panel is AI-driven compliance, maturity models and new operating realities. This session is brought to you by Resolver and Cye and is hosted by Jill Heinz, AI Trust Strategist and founder at Saddle Stitch Consulting. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Hello, everybody. It's really my privilege today to introduce our incredible panel of experts who really represent practical insights from nearly every angle of AI compliance. So first, let me introduce Dr. Vita Amadi. She brings extensive experience operationalizing AI compliance from across academia and industry. She's currently Data and AI Governance Officer at Electrolux Group, where she leads enterprise frameworks for responsible AI data governance and risk oversight. Reuven Aronashvili is a globally recognized cybersecurity authority and recipient of the Global InfoSec Trailblazing CEO of the Year Award. Rubi is the founder of and CEO of Cye, a cyber exposure management company that services more than 500 organizations worldwide. Peter Blazek, head of AI strategy group for compliance at ING, drives the Gen AI transformation agenda. With over 15 years in banking, AI, and ML leadership, Peter sets the enterprise AI strategy and roadmap for compliance functions. Ben Bradley is a senior governance risk and compliance product manager at Resolver, where he brings his deep knowledge of creating customer solutions to optimizing and improving Resolver's GRC products with daily users in mind. Katya Zadima is the general counsel and global legal executive who heads product compliance, AI, and employment at Harness. She also serves on the International Association of Privacy Professionals Exam Development Board and holds leading certifications in AI governance, privacy, security, and risk. Welcome, all of you. I am very excited about our conversation today. I think we have the perfect cross-section of expertise to really lean into the new demands on compliance in light of AI. On that note, Ben, I think I want to start with you. From a vendor perspective, you get sort of a bird's eye view of compliance and how organizations are dealing with it in the generative AI paradigm, I think from many different angles. So I'm hopeful that you can kind of set the stage for us to explain what you're seeing in terms of AI adoption and the compliance challenges that you're seeing sort of across the board.
Sure, thank you, and pleasure to be speaking today. Yeah, certainly. So we kind of see sort of two main perspectives from the vendor side in terms of how how compliance teams are going to be interacting with AI. Firstly, we've got the teams themselves using AI. That is where they're using it in their day job to accelerate, deal with data at scale. Some regulatory bodies, obviously large texts that they've got to trawl through. And then the second element, which is the approvals, sort of the kind of as a organization with, using the compliance team to take a look at these use cases and ensure that, we're kind of, happy with as a compliance team that, it's something we're going to, accept that risk. So to break that down, the teams using AI themselves, this is something that's has been around for a long time. There's teams have been using AI to kind of trawl through regulatory text, for example, for a long time. But there's definitely a ramp up in terms of maturity over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. Certainly, naturally, compliance people are quite anti a bot doing your job for you. So it's kind of taken a little while to kind of as teams to bring it up, but definitely in the last 6 months, everybody's asking for it. Everybody wants it to help with their day job. There's FCA's like thousands of requirements. I mean, that's hard to kind of sift through without some assistance. But yeah, definitely coming into that assistance. it's definitely an AI assistant stage right now. We're seeing customers wanting to, be guided with these sort of different use cases, whether that's like recommending controls or generating data or whatever it may be. They still want that human in the loop, and I think that'll be around for a long time from a personal standpoint. I think that there's definitely teams want that element, and certainly compliance professionals will probably want to have the human in the loop for a while. And then to go to the other side, which is like the approvals, that's something again that's like picking up a lot of steam recently. It's definitely a newer part of the compliance professionals, job description. But we're seeing so many requests to have portals, to have workflows, risk ratings, regular reviews of models, of use cases. So that's definitely something we're seeing an uptick in now, and of course, we're building things to help out, but it's that's definitely a newer part of the compliance professional's job for sure.
Thank you. I want to now turn it over to Peter, who has perhaps maybe the opposite end of the perspective here in terms of the fact that you are in-house in a very highly regulated space. And I would love to hear what you are experiencing. How's AI affecting the business operations? What demands is it placing on compliance functions from your perspective?
Thanks, Jill. And I think it is quite relevant to mention that I'm not a traditional compliance officer. So I'm coming from a mathematics background. I was building data science teams for like 15, 20 years in different area of banking. And ING decided to place me into this regulatory environment with a specific target, that because we recognize that we can't really govern AI if we don't really understand what it is working and how is it working like. So that's where I'm coming from. And the honest answer for us, the biggest topic is not the tools. The biggest topic is speed. 2 years ago, we had probably in every year 3 to 5 AI use cases where we wanted to start with. Nowadays, every department is starting with a different Gen AI initiative, and we need to just be prepared for it. And that's where we really recognize it, that we have a lot of brilliant idea across the whole bank, genuinely good ones, but they could not go through. Some of those really took 6 to 8 months to get to maturity, mainly because of the fact that we had a lot of risk assessments, what we had to do, and compliance was just simply not ready for it, and together also with risk management. So we did something about it, and we started to build AI agents which are conducting interviews. AI agents which are doing the risk assessments, really generating the transcripts, populating basically all those templates. And this is how we try to fix those bottlenecks with AI. And that's the kind of shift what compliance needs to be ready for. And the second topic I would mention is that AI is not really sitting in one risk box. So it is really literally can be anything from data privacy, it can be model risk, it can be conduct risk, third-party risk, operational risk. And the traditional compliance silos were just not ready for this type of exposure. So therefore, we had to be making this massive shift in this.
Great. Well, we're going to hear a lot more about how you made that shift, but I'd like to turn it over to Katya for the moment. You certainly, from a legal perspective, are thinking about the new risk profiles, sources of risk that enterprise organizations are contending with as they scale up their AI deployments. What risks, in your opinion, do leaders need to be looking for? What is that looking like from your point of view?
Of course, that's a great question. I think that the answer is very tied to what Ben and Peter said, right? I think that the risk that the players need to look at really depends on where the company sits in the spectrum of AI, right? So if you think about it, really AI model providers are the ones who sit at the top with the highest risk, and they are really the ones, that have to comply with the majority of the legal requirements that exist. There are some laws that are specific just like and codes of practice that are just specific for AI model providers, right? And they're really the ones who have to focus on the majority of risks when it comes to data training, bias, hallucination, right? Red teaming, IP protection, fairness, reputation, all of those things. So obviously, when you're assessing risks, those companies are the ones that are going to have the toughest job, especially because on top of that, they will usually also be AI systems providers and deployers, right? So think of an OpenAI with its ChatGPT and then its employees, like Peter and Ben said, basically using AI to make their job better on every day. So that would be the first category, I think, and the risks they will have to look at. I would say that the second category is AI system providers. That's, from my professional experience, where I've been. So right, so the kind of the companies that I've worked for, we are system providers, right? So we provide AI products in the market using that could be either third-party models like your OpenAI, or developing your own in-house, and you have all of those risks tying to it. And I would say for this second category, the risks really have to do with contractual requirements, right? Both on the source, making sure that the contracts that you have with your AI model providers protect you from them using your data, right, or the data of your end customers, making sure that you own the input, that you own the output, making sure that, for instance, you have a separate instance for security, they have controls for APIs, you have zero retention. And then at the end of the spectrum with your customers, right, the controls that you put in when you are providing those products to your customers, because they will expect the same from you. They will expect that you too have protections around hallucination, bias, etc. And that is something that many times you can only do contractually. So I would say that that's like the second bucket. And then the third bucket is the deployers. I think that's really where Ben and Peter were aiming at. The risks here are basically what they were saying. It's about the use case review, not so much about the tools like they were saying, but about the use case. What is a certain team going to be doing with that AI tool, whether it's ChatGPT, right? Because we know that the law says that, usually a ChatGPT will be limited risk. What if the talent acquisition team starts using ChatGPT to assess CVs of people? You go from a limited risk to something that can be potentially prohibited, right? So I believe, to answer your question, the risk that leaders need to be looking for depend really on the buckets where the companies are going to sit.
Thank you for that. I want to drill in now into one particular type of risk, cybersecurity risk. And Ruby, this is for you. What are you experiencing with your clients in the industry in terms of the impact AI is having on cyber risks? And what is on the horizon that folks need to be looking out for that maybe they were not prior to the generative AI moment we're in?
Yeah, so, when I look at it, there are two sides to the risk, right? One of them is what was just mentioned several times here in organizations' own adoption of AI. This is one, right? And generative AI is becoming very quickly agentic AI, and now you have agents that are starting to break some silos. So I can give you an example of a customer that we have, that they worked for 3 years to do micro-segmentation in their environment that was really top-notch. In the era of AI, now they're actually breaking those silos between the different networks, because the AI agent need access to multiple items or multiple resources in multiple environments. So you find yourself not only that you're actually going back in the cybersecurity maturity that you've built over time, you do that in a way that is, in some cases, not really controlled. And you see that AI agents are really taking over. And that's something that, you're asking about the horizon. I definitely think that will be one of the main challenges that we see within organizations. How do we control those powerful, let's say, capabilities that we are providing them the power to do a lot? And what happens when those are compromised or not acting as we expect? That's one topic. Second, which I think should be definitely taken into consideration in a very serious way, is the fact that all the tools that are available today to enterprises are available also to the bad guys. And in some cases, those are being utilized in a much faster pace because they don't need to be enterprise grade, right? They don't need to comply with all the relevant requirements that we are putting in different organizations. So they are moving very fast. Just to give you one statistical number, a vulnerability that was exposed on internet perimeter of a company's, let's say, perimeter in the past was expected to be exploited within time frame of 60 to 90 days, more or less, identified and exploited. Today, we see that the velocity of identification and exploitation of vulnerabilities are less than a day, actually hours, and very soon it will be minutes, right? So the way that we think about compliance in general and the connection between risk and compliance, because those are not the same things, they are obviously connected, but it's not really the same thing, we should take into consideration the changes not only coming from our own organization and utilization of AI, but what really happens in our ecosystem, and I'm sure that we'll talk more about it in a second. But generally speaking, velocity that was mentioned here before, speed, velocity, will be a key driver, and time of exposure. That's the parameter that we need to think about. How do we make sure that we limit the time of exposure to the possible minimum, and utilizing tools, capabilities in the organization for much smarter and faster decision making? Today, we are very far away from it, very far away. Waiting for a meeting in Friday morning to just make a decision around whether we are going to patch something, it's not going to work anymore, okay? Just to give you an idea. So from my point of view, those two fronts, the insider threat, I call it, from the agentic AI, and utilization of different tools from the model creation, as Katya mentioned, from the model to the through the platforms and the deployers, all true and important insights. The other side of the industry and ecosystem threat profile, that's something that has to be taken into consideration as well.
Yes, lots to unpack, and certainly agree. We are hearing lots about speed in many respects, and how that's exerting some tension on our existing systems and processes that have not quite made that leap. So, Vita, question for you: given the rapid evolving nature of AI technology, I know that you are, an advocate for new compliance operating models. We clearly need to rethink how we have been doing things in the past. I would love to hear your perspective on what you're seeing.
Yeah, thank you for asking this question, Jill, because it's important. We need to shift mindset. The technology and the area we are living in, it's moving fast, where the compliance is like old things. It has been there for a long time, and the traditional compliance models assume stable systems. AI is not a stable system; it's the evolving system. So what is working now, it might not working in 2-3 months and not be valid for that period of time. So that's why we need to shift toward the dynamic monitoring, model risk management, continuous validation, and also traceability on the decision in a way. Compliance function must become a technically informed and operationally integrated. Otherwise, we will lose the track and the connection with that. From my opinion, effective AI compliance requires the new operating model, where we have like integrating legal, risk, data, security, and engineering together from design a step until deployment. And it's not finishing there, because we need to consider and treating AI and agentic AI as a product which needs to have a life cycle. So it has a continuous monitoring and maintenance. That's why we need to have a shift our mind from the traditional compliance toward the dynamic compliance. And this new way of working should have a clear accountability structure, defining the control ownership, and also measurable assurance mechanisms, not just the control mechanism. It should be measurable. And that is the foundational to scaling AI responsibly. Otherwise, we will lose some of the part, and each of these control, if they work in a silo, we might come to the chaos where we don't know where to start.
Yes, good points. I'm hearing a lot of similarities in what you were describing, as well as other panelists, around the fact that this technology is really forcing us to work across divisions in ways that we have not been compelled to do so perhaps directly before. So Katya, question for you. You have worked on these ground up initiatives to really steer culture change, to be prepared to meet some of these challenges. I assume a number of us listening are thinking, gosh, this sounds like, yes, we need to move in this direction. How do we even think about getting started with, these kind of cultural and policy changes?
So I think that, nowadays AI is a very, very big word, right? And I think that the number one thing that's, apart from making money, right? The number one thing that boards will be pushing for, and they have been pushing for, is adoption of AI. Even if that doesn't really mean anything, even if that just means, companies using ChatGPT to do like research. And that's what I think that's where the key distinction is. I think that regardless of all companies pushing for the use of AI, I think that we need to step back and really ask ourselves, what is the risk here? Because when you distill it really down, like when you zoom out, and in 2026, we've had some time to assess things and understand, when you zoom out, if there are no high risk decisions being made by deployers, right? And let's exclude model providers and let's exclude deployers, right? When you look at deployers, if no PII is involved, and if no high risk AI is being used, what do you have left? You have left security issues. That's what you have, and you have left unintended use cases, right? So the potential use of employees of the same tool that you approved for a certain end, and then going around and using it for something else. Or for instance, not reviewing the output. Somebody said human in the loop, right? So somebody using that tool in a way that it's not intended, or not following the instructions. And so I think AI, yes, there are many, many risks to it, but when you zoom out again, maybe more than 90% of companies using AI will be using AI for low risk uses. And so AI will not be doing anything new than what the company was already doing. They will just be doing it in a different way. And I think that, yes, when PII is involved, the risk can change, but not always. That's not always the case, right? You can have processing activities of PII, of personal data, right, that are high risk without AI. And then you can have AI systems using personal data, and it doesn't change the risk of the AI system, not in and of itself, right? So, and so I think that when we are looking at these considerations, and to answer your question, what are the most important considerations? I think it's really understanding what is really the risk in there, because it's not the same. AI is not all the same. And sometimes, we have this big word and everybody's talking about it and everybody's making such a big fuss about it. Sometimes it's not, that big of a deal, except for the security risks. And Rubi mentioned a lot of them, for the security risks, and the unintended use cases. Of course, there's the entire spectrum of high risk and the careful things that we need to be doing, especially with models, agents, like other people said, but maybe that's not the case for the majority of companies.
Yeah, very interesting. And I suppose maybe a bit reassuring. This then feels a bit more, doable, approachable in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you think about it, we have the codes of practice for AI. We have, the new SB 53 in California. All of that, like 99% of companies don't have to worry about any of that.
Interesting. I do want to pick up on a thread related to agentic AI. It has come up, and it seems to be one of those, aspects of this technology that we cite as, okay, this is going to introduce maybe some novel things, perhaps. Vita, I would love to hear a little bit more about special concerns that you would highlight as, maybe related to agentic AI, things that you think about that perhaps could go unexamined if we're not familiar with dealing with AI technology.
Yeah, agentic AI is different comparing with the other AI. The reason we need to treat it differently is that, first of all, machine will make a decision autonomously. And based on what information we give or guardrail, we said, okay, machine can decide for this and that, and then it can work. If we don't define those, the agentic AI can have widespread impact on the decision. They don't have accountability, and it will be a huge it will have a huge impact on the reputation on companies. Just consider when we are using agentic AI, so it's not operating in a technical vacuum. It is interacting with the different things like customers, suppliers, regulatories, and also with the public. So if that autonomous agent change, for instance, pricing or declining customers or relocating the resources, that decisions become a brand moment. That's why we need to make sure we have a proper guardrail. We have a clear agent risk classification. We know what the agent can decide and cannot decide. We also need to have a continuous monitoring and also have a human oversight. The reason for that is if we have a human oversight in the agentic AI, it has a possibility to stop when something is going wrong, like mostly avoiding to become a big challenge or big problem for organization. And then we need to have a specific incident response process for this agent. For instance, agent is deviating from what expected to behave. Then we need to have some process to stop that agent and avoid to putting more risk and threat toward the organization. So from my perspective, that when we are talking about agentic AI, we need to have assurance in organization and establish auditability, explainability of the decisions that are taken by the agent. And also we have escalation mechanisms that can address the unique risks of adaptive and agentic system. So this is a different type, and we need to deal with in a different way. That's at least I want to raise it and bring it as awareness. It's not exactly the same thing. It's a bit different, and the landscape of the risk and exposure will be much bigger.
Yes, and it's interesting that you cite, these potential brand moments that could be, made or broken through agentic, and the role of human in the loop. There's a trust element here, and Ben, I think this is a good segue to you. I know that you have talked about the role of leadership, stakeholder trust, how you build that even internally and externally. So I wonder what guidance you would offer from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think I'm kind of building on Vita and Katya's points, like data, like sovereignty, I think is critical. As soon as you're handing data sort of decisions, I guess sovereignty might not be the best word for it, but those decisions, handing it to an agent or to an AI model or whatever it is, as soon as you're handing that without any human in the loop, it enters a level of risk, and I think that needs to be considered in the decision to approve. And I think the kind of the second piece of that is, as like organizations, you've got to understand that everybody has ChatGPT on their phone. Like if I could pull it up now, like if all AIs were banned on my laptop, I could pull it up and still tap something into my phone and pull that up. So there's like that. There's a base level of risk that you simply cannot mitigate. So being open to that as leaders, going, there's going to be some level of risk. Just letting someone use Excel and then being able to go crazy with Excel anyway. There's going to be that with any system. It's just another type of system. So being open to that, being open to kind of letting, trusting your employees to be able to use this, with a good knowledge and a good understanding of what it can do. but put those boundaries in place. Say, look, as soon as you're using an agent to make a decision, you have to have a human in the loop. As soon as you're using, customer data, there's got to be that sovereignty. There's got to be that kind of, not leaving your jurisdiction or whatever it may be. Putting those guardrails in place, but letting and trusting your teams to be able to, use the sort of the models that you provide them. And again, that's where that sort of approval review comes in. I think it's a good discussion to have. Engage all the teams. Bring them all together. They've all got the same goal. Drive the business forward. Like let's sort of have that discussion.
No, I love that. And I want to pick up on another thread through yours and Vita's comments in particular. Vita, you were talking about explainability, and then you're talking about trust and adoption. Ruby, I know that in our conversations, you've talked about explainability, which you could argue is an element of trust, is a bit overrated. And I would love for you to kind of expand on that provocative statement.
Yeah, so, when you think about explainability, a lot of organizations, including ourselves, we invested a lot of time in our products, in our platforms, in our management time, in order to make sure that everything that we do is explainable. From why do you do X and not Y? Why do you need the budget for that? And so on, which, again, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying when you put it in the same set of considerations, for example, with velocity that we've mentioned before, explainability becomes much less important. Because, to continue also what Ben just mentioned, if you have the people that you trust them and you put the experts in place, you need to be able to let them work. Because if we need to spend our time in explaining everything over and over again, and let's assume that we just need one management meeting in order to just approve the next mitigation step, just one meeting, it might be too late. So I'm not saying explainability is not important. I'm saying is much less of a consideration when we think about the future of AI in general and agentic AI specifically, as I mentioned before, from two angles, from the inside of the organization and from the outside of the organization. So again, to me, thinking about how to make things more explainable, that's maybe something that we need to continue doing. I'm not sure that we need to spend our time in just convincing and explaining overall to others, but we need to be convinced ourselves. So that's a very important statement. So we don't need to do something or go ahead and push all the relevant buttons if we are not convinced ourselves. So self-explainability is still extremely important. However, spending or wasting time in trying to convince others, that's something that we have to take roles and responsibilities, the concept of roles and responsibilities, and make it much sharper to make sure that people that are authorized or have the mandate to make the decisions, they can make it at speed and at scale. Definitely if we talk about human in the loop concept that we heard several times. So human in the loop is something that slows us down. We need to understand that. It's important. Without it, we lose control completely. But if you put human in the loop, you have to make sure that you give the human all the capabilities and the tools they need in order to move at the speed or scale of something close even to what we need today.
Yeah, not a trivial challenge. And Peter, I'm very interested to hear, what your read is, because here we're talking about humans in the loop, the need for speed, the need to reimagine our compliance. How do you scale something like that? What is it that, I know that you have extensive experience preparing organizations for this kind of change. What does that look like in practice for you?
So I believe by today, everybody is aware of that interesting number that about 10% of the real GenAI initiatives are coming into real productive processes in most organizations. By ING, it is 90%. And why is that? This is because we have some smart people. Yes, we have some of the best data scientists, some of the best people on the market, but there are a lot of other different reasons as well. I think one of the main topic what these leaders are really missing is not that what technology to use at all. Vast majority can identify it relatively well, but the most important topic for me is if your organization able to absorb that AI initiative. Do you have the skill Do you have the mandate? Do you have the right governance model in place to really scale those? And almost everybody can, jump on that we need to take a new Gen AI model, we need to use it, we need to use the newest, the bestest. But for me, we really learned the hard way. Making generic AI trainings, I have a great passion to dislike them. I like to do it that way, that we are taking processes out of the ING systems. We break it down into small processes. We identify that which process can be automated with which type of AI system, and where do we need to keep still humans in the loop. And then eventually we try to create workshops for our teams, which are actively working together with the compliance officers, the risk officers, that they are working on their own processes, not some generic AI training coming from a consultant. So for us, upskilling 3,000 people is not a training program. It is much rather a change management exercise. You need to have really people in compliance who have credible discussions on a Monday morning with the data scientist, and then on Friday discuss the same topic with a slightly different language with the regulator as well. And the second topic for me is that a lot of people are just missing it out, that they do believe that regulation is stable. They are not stable. The UAI Act is coming in phases, and you need to treat it in phases. You need to be able to stay flexible. And if you just have a checklist that you are going to go through this list, you are really working on a sand. It is not going to work out very well for you. So what you need is a certain level of flexibility to treat the regulatory topics, all those issues which are coming from the frameworks which are set up. So if you are having one strategy for the upcoming 1 to 3 years, and you do believe that this is going to work in that way, it's not going to be very functional. And one more topic I would mention is strategy is handled by top management. Very often you hear about board members and others discussing the strategy of AI, how we are implementing AI. Then the other topic is on the bottom, the tooling. What many people are missing out is that who owns that monitoring process for the Gen AI initiative which has been introduced? Which are those AI initiatives which are high risk? In these large organizations, very often this is forgotten, this is not identified in time. And that is causing a lot of friction, a lot of delay, and incorrectly implemented use case. And that's where I do believe that ING is very successful, that we are having an extremely good planning process, and we are super flexible when it comes to this, that how to adopt those regulatory requirements.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I feel like we could just talk the entire conference ourselves. There's just so much to dig into here, but we are about 5 minutes out. So I think what I would like to do is kind of call on each of you to respond to, in a minute or so about, really given everything that we've talked about today. There's a lot of different considerations. A lot of different risk profiles, cultural change to be had. What one thing would you give our audience to have them go forward and adopt a more modern approach to compliance? What's the one focus area they should begin with, if nothing else, that they should take away from our session today? So I will go ahead and I will start with Ruby on this one.
Yes, so I think that the number one thing that I would say is that when thinking about a compliance strategy in general, we need to change the mindset from control coverage in general, right, to something that is more risk-oriented, meaning we need to understand where the risk is or the exposure is, do that continuously, like Vita mentioned before. That's a key item. Do that continuously, and not frequently is not good enough yet, right, or at this point. And put a culture in the policy or in the compliance process itself of decision making as number one priority. So to be very clear, be able to make quick decisions, change things as you go, rather than just think about control coverage. Right? The mindset has to shift from that to velocity. Okay.
Excellent. Katya, what do you say?
Listen, I think that if I can just give one takeaway, I would say that the first thing to do is really understanding what is it that the company wants in terms of AI, right? So hearing Peter speaking, I can really tell that, for instance, ING is really wanting to adopt AI and really wanting employees to explore it and to really leverage it. That's absolutely amazing, especially in the sector where they are. I love it. But I really think it depends. So understand what is it that the company wants. Does the company really want to pursue AI, have employees use it, explore it, build products, etc.? And if yes, your risk profile is going to be completely different from maybe a more traditional banking, or insurance, sectors where the company will be like, no, we are really completely risk adverse. We don't want anything to do with that. And then with that, then any other processes, risk profiles, like Rubi was saying, that you will build within the company will adapt to that. So if I give one takeaway, is that one, understand what does the company want, and then from that you can just really build the rest.
Thank you. Ben?
I think for me, probably trust with boundaries. I think letting trust that you've hired good people and that they're going to be doing their job and they're going to use an AI to help them do their job better, quicker, scan thousands of records quickly, easily, and be able to pass their judgment on it. And I guess you're kind of employing them to pass judgment and to make decisions. Like even at the lowest level, it's just lots of little decisions. Trust that they can use these extra functionalities to be able to help them with their day job and be better, and trust that they can obviously move your business forward.
Thank you. Vita, your takeaway.
When we started, we talked about many organizations now are racing to deploy AI and AI agentic. I just want to say that it's a good approach to use all the advantage, but in few years, the differentiator won't be the speed. It will be control. And AI-driven compliance become a competitive advantage. This is what I want to highlight. And what that means is the organizations who embed transparency, accountability, and trust into their AI infrastructure can position themselves better in a market. And it become more future proof. And AI by itself distributed the responsibility. It's not removing it. So we need to have a different approach to make sure we are accountable, and the accountability in the age of AI or agentic AI doesn't disappear. It's redistributed.
Wonderful. I love that. Peter, can you take us home with your takeaway?
So start with an inventory and not the strategy. Forget the strategy in the beginning. Go back to your officers, ask them, are we aware of all the AI systems, what we have in the organization? Because there's a lot of shadow AI. And before you write the first policy, you really need to find out that what do you have in the organization? Because I promise you, by the time you write the first policy, there's already going to be like 12 different Gen AI production in your organization. So go back, ask that how many of those systems do we have, and how many of those has already been assessed by compliance and risk management. And if your answer is that I don't know, then you know what is the first topic what you need to cover. That's your starting point. So go back, have your inventory, and then you're going to have a much more successful organization.
Well, I want to thank you all so much. You've given us much to think about and a lot of very practical advice. So thank you for sharing your expertise. And Nicola, I think I am prepared to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I've taken some notes of that session, which was so insightful, and it's always so lovely to kind of have reflected back to you the things you're hopefully thinking in your organizations too. For me, AI adoption is about a change management exercise, which also requires cultural change and a strategic approach. AI breaks compliance silos, so it demands holistic approaches to compliance. It can pose new risks and threats as well as opportunities, but doesn't necessarily change risk profiles of existing activities. Agentic is bringing additional risks and demands regulatory agents for oversight. and both the pace of technological and regulatory change demand an iterative approach. Thank you again to Jill, all the panelists and the sponsors, Resolver and Cye. We'll be right back.